Warning, this video contains spoilers! Hello everyone and welcome to my ranking for the Cuphead Delicious Last Course bosses. This list is not based off of difficulty and more based off of how fun they are. Ready? Let's go!
If there's a single meal to help make calories real, it's a delicious last course.
Coming in at number 12, we have the Pawns. The Pawns are the first boss of the King's Leap, and they serve as kind of a warm-up before the true challenge starts. Because of this boss fight is very simple. There are 8 pawns watching you from above, and they will jump down one at a time. Your goal is to parry each and every one of them. Every time one has been parried, the cycle gets faster. And if a pawn has been parried, it can still kill you. And that's the entire fight. I have nothing against this fight, it's just the least interesting one in the game.
If there's a single meal to help make calories real, it's a delicious last course.
Coming in at number 11, we have the Queen. This boss is disappointing. The Queen is the last boss in the King's Leap, so you would expect something big. Instead, what we got was a really unsatisfying boss. My favorite part about the King's Leap is that there is a satisfying way to beat every boss. However, the way you kill the Queen is not that satisfying at all. What you need to do is parry the fuses when the cannon lines up with the Queen so you'll hit her with a cannonball. And it's really hard to tell when the cannon is actually lined up with the Queen. Like, look at this clip. I clearly hit her, but it didn't count. And for her attacks, she only has 2 and they're not that interesting. Overall, the Queen is not worthy of being the final boss in the King's Leap.
If there's a single meal to help make calories real, it's a delicious last course.
Coming in at number 10, we have the Rook. The Rook is definitely the hardest boss in the King's Leap. Your goal is to parry the heads that are being flung at you right back at the Rook. While this is happening, there will also be sparks on the floor which are pretty annoying, but manageable. I love this boss fight because of how satisfying it is to perfectly hit a head right into his face. I also love how much attention to detail is put into this boss. For example, once you've parried a pink head, it will begin to smile, indicating it is happy that you're trying to defeat the Rook. And I also find it so perfect that in the knockout animation, the Rook's head falls off, which is basically justice for all the people he's beheaded. Overall, this is a fun boss with great attention to detail.
If there's a single meal to help make calories real, it's a delicious last course.
Coming in at number 9, we have the Knight. In my opinion, this is by far the most satisfying fight. It feels so good to land a hit on him while he's charging. The Knight can only do 4 things. He can taunt, which adds nothing to the fight. However, Studio MDHR still added it, which is just great. He can do a small sword slice, a big sword slice, and he can charge. This one takes a while to get used to, but once you get the hang of it, it's really fun, and pretty long. You have to hit this guy in the mohawk 20 times. Overall, a great boss with a great design and a great way to defeat.
If there's a single meal to help make calories real, it's a delicious last course.
Coming in at number 8, we have the Demon and Angel. This boss is a gimmick battle. The gimmick being, whatever direction you are facing, that's the side the demon is. And the demon can hurt you, however the angel can't. Overall, this gimmick is good, however kind of annoying. Where this boss fight really shines is in the animation. This is probably my favorite boss based on their animation. It's so crisp and the skeletal devil in the back is a great touch. Yes, the gimmick is frustrating and it totally breaks in multiplayer, but I still think this is an amazing boss.
If there's a single meal to help make calories real, it's a delicious last course.
Coming in at number 7, we have the Bishop. The Bishop is my favorite boss in the King's Leap. The Bishop's head will fly around the arena, shooting little thingies at you. Your objective is to parry the Bishop's head. However, it will not always be parryable. If you want to parry the head, you will have to make sure all the candles in the background are unlit. And as the fight goes on, more candles will be lit. This is by far the most unique chess-themed boss in Cuphead. It's really scary when the head is flying towards you and you only have one candle to unlight. The game becomes a mad dash for the candle. I love how the bishop's body does this weird twirly thing in the background. And throughout the battle, the bishop's head will fly in several different ways. This boss is by far the best chess boss. We are officially halfway done with the bosses. Also, we are done with the mini-bosses. From now on, all the bosses are full length, and mandatory to beat the game.
If there's a single meal to help make Alice real, it's a delicious last course.
Coming in at number 6, we have Esther Winchester. This is my least favorite out of all of the mandatory bosses. The reason for this is I generally prefer the non-plane levels, but this one is still really fun. In the first phase, Esther rides around in this saloon cart thing. This phase is insane because Esther decides to bombard you with a stupid amount of projectiles. She shoots snake oil, she lassos a big cactus that takes up half of the screen, and don't even get me started on the stupid bird. In phase 2, she pulls out a vacuum and starts vacuuming up money. Then she shoots it back out in safes. Yep. That's the entire second phase. Phase 3 is where things get truly zany. Esther gets sucked into her own vacuum, which turns into a cooker, and all of a sudden, we're facing a cow made out of sausages. This is probably the most hilarious moment in Cuphead. It's so unexpected, and the sausage cow is very menacing despite being really silly. She shoots stakes at you that fly in this really annoying pattern, and you have to avoid them while avoiding cans of beans. Have I mentioned how much I love this game? But wait, we aren't even done yet. There's still one more phase. The fourth and final phase involves the sausage cow being put into a can, and now you have to fight the can, which is shooting peppers at you and trying to hit you with these weird stringy sausages. This phase is really stressful, but once you get through it, you'll have successfully beat Esther Winchester. In my opinion, this is one of the hardest bosses in the DLC, so you'll need to bring your A game if you want to take her down. Overall, this is a really creative boss that is really challenging to beat.
If there's a single meal to help make Alice real, it's a delicious last course.
Coming in at number 5, we have Mortimer Freeze. This boss has one of my favorite backgrounds in the entire game, with all the snow creatures watching you from the back. And when Mortimer changes phase, they will raise their hands in the air, which is such a cool detail. Pun totally intended. Phase 1 of this boss fight only has 3 attacks, however, it's still really difficult, mainly because of these little pointy twerps. These guys are the bane of my existence, and he shoots them out quite often. He will also try to crush you with an absolutely huge whale and shoot cards at you. In phase 2, Mortimer fuses with this giant snow monster who has the earth-shattering ability to turn into a refrigerator. This phase is very fast-paced, especially when he rolls all over the stage. He can also slam the floor, causing swords to pop out of the ground. Last but not least, we have phase 3. In this phase, Mortimer turns into a giant snowflake. What makes this phase hard is it takes place on 5 rotating platforms, and a lot of his attacks are really hard to dodge. For example, the eyeball that randomly shoots out vertical lasers, or the buckets which spew into 3 other projectiles. I think one of the best parts about this boss is that it's very satisfying to dodge an attack. It's very satisfying to jump over him when he rolls across the floor. It's very, very satisfying when you time it right and not get shot by the eyeball lasers. And it's very, very, very satisfying when you dodge the stupid pointy enemies. This is a really fun boss with a great background.
If there's a single meal to help make Alice real, it's a delicious last course.
Coming in at number 4, we have Glumstone the Giant. This boss is really fun. Let's start with the first phase. This phase is very overwhelming. There are tons of attacks on the screen at all times. This dude grabs a bear to try and kill us. Then, when he gets bored of it, he just yeets it into the background. And have I mentioned how much I hate the geese? And you can't even go to the bottom level without being attacked by gnomes. This phase is very overwhelming, but manageable. The second phase involves Glumstone ripping his beard off, which must have been very painful. Then he brings out a puppet of King Dice and the Devil. It's nice to see that they got a little cameo in the DLC. All they want to do is play a game of catch. It's not their fault Cuphead just happened to get in the way of their game. What am I saying? I hate this stupid ball. And I hate the gnomes that jump out of the ground. This phase will keep you on your toes the entire time. Now we move on to the third phase, where Glumstone decides to eat Cuphead, and the third phase takes place inside of Glumstone's stomach, where we fight this weird growth Glumstone has growing in his stomach. I feel disturbed. So this thing will spit out food to the skeleton platforms, and once one of the pieces of food hits a platform, the platform goes away. However, if this thing decides to shoot out a bone, instead of going away, the platform will stick out its tongue. If you parry the tongue, all of the platforms will come back. This third phase is really unique in setting and gameplay. Wait, is that a scuba diving gnome?
If there's a single meal to help make Alice real, it's a delicious last course.
Coming in at number 3, we have the Moonshine Mob. I've noticed there's a lot of unused content from the original game that has been reused for this boss. For example, the first phase is a redesign of this unused spider boss. And speaking of the first phase, let's talk about it. This phase is crazy. We got bombs that explode shortly after you touch them. We got these drunk flies that try to kill you. The spider throws this caterpillar that bounces all over the stage. And there are police bugs that shoot pesticide at you. And by the way, I really love how the police bugs shoot towards wherever the boss is. Because why would they be shooting at Cuphead? Cuphead didn't do anything. The whole reason the police bugs are here is to take down the mob. I love that little attention to detail. This phase is really overwhelming because when he summons the drunk flies or the bombs, he summons a lot of them. Moving on to phase 2, we go against this bug dancer. Phase 2 is basically a reskin of the unused light boss. Yeah, I definitely like this version more than that version. In this phase, you have to dodge the sound waves coming out of the phonograph in the middle. When the sound waves are green, you can touch them. When they're yellow, you can also touch them. But when they're red, you can't. This phase can pretty easily be teased by Miss Chalice's invincibility roll, but I prefer to do it the regular way. Once you get the hang of this phase, it's pretty easy. On to the third phase, where we fight Mr. Anteater Man. For this phase, you're probably gonna need to use Chaser or Crackshot, because his weak point is his nose, and it's constantly moving around. So this guy will stick out his tongue, grab a bunch of bugs, and then shoot them back out at you. Sometimes he even psychs you out. But other than that, that's the entire third phase. It's pretty hard, but he only really does one thing. Once you beat this phase, it's finally over, and you successfully beat the Moonshine Mob. What? Alright, before the fight ends, this little bugger decides to cheap shot you. Yep, that's right. There's an actual fake knockout screen used to troll the player. This is hilarious. Actually beating the snail is not hard at all, but he'll probably kill you because you'll probably only have 1 health left. This moment is pure genius. You see on the map, the Moonshine Mob is actually the closest boss to the bakery, so it's probably the one you're going to fight first, which means the fake knockout screen is viewed as a new knockout screen to replace the old one. This ending sequence is genius, and the boss is one of the best ones. And in the opening animation, the dancer bug twerks at Cuphead. This boss fight is amazing.
If there's a single meal to help make Alice real, it's a delicious last course.
Coming in at number 2, we have the final boss of the game, which is Chef Saltbaker. Now, just a warning, the first phase can get very graphic. Wow, I honestly think Saltbaker is more evil than the devil. Look at how scared those limes look. Anyway, on to the actual fight. Chef Saltbaker will chop up ingredients and chuck them at you. The sugar cubes will slowly float across the screen, and some of them are parryable. The limes are boomerangs that use the same sound effect as Cagney Carnation's boomerang. The gnome berries come from above, and the animal crackers will jump up and down. This phase's animation is amazing. Look at how he adjusts his bow at the beginning of the fight. Look at how evil and psychotic he looks. Look at how smoothly one animation segues into another. This phase is amazing, except for the stupid fireball. Seriously, does there have to be an enemy I hate in every boss? Esther Winchester has the vultures, Mortimer Freeze has the stupid pointy guys, Glumstone has the bouncing gnomes, the Moonshine Mob has... okay, this one was fine. But now we have this stupid flame guy who is super annoying. Moving on to the next phase, Salty Boy pulls a Mario and eats a mushroom to grow bigger. Except for some reason, he doesn't eat it, he just puts it in his head. Well, that's kinda weird. In phase 2, Saltbaker is so big that the second phase takes place on the palm of his hand. And of course, he had to bring the stupid fire guy over to phase 2. And now he's on the ground, which means it's even harder to avoid him. This phase is unique because you can't hurt him with your normal weapons. Instead, you have to shoot the pepper shakers to make them fly into him. This phase is really tense. I don't know exactly, but I think you have to beat about 11 pepper shakers for him to move on to the next phase. The pepper shakers also sneeze at you, and they sneeze out these little, whatever this is. This phase is really difficult. Mostly because the fireball can sometimes make it really hard to avoid the leaves that Saltbaker tosses at you. This second phase has a lot going on, but once it's over, we move on to the craziest part of the fight. The part where Chef Saltbaker's body gets completely demolished, and now we have to fight the salt within him, which is a really cool idea. You can even see Saltbaker's lifeless husk in the background, which is kinda creepy. Phase 3 is really easy. There are 2 Chef Saltbakers made out of salt who are doing a dance, and there's also this weird saw blade thing. Most of the time when I get to this phase, I have my super, so as soon as he spawns, I shoot him with it, and then he's dead. So yeah, the third phase isn't that interesting, but the fourth and final phase is great. We have to face off against Chef Saltbaker's heart, which is parryable. It doesn't do anything special if you parry him, but it's still cool. This phase is really intense. It feels like a final effort to defeat Saltbaker. And this whole phase takes place on tiny platforms falling down. And I'm pretty sure these platforms are actually pieces of Saltbaker's body, which is kinda creepy. And also the salt tornadoes to the left and right are really well animated. And the music just ties it all together. And it comes in 3 parts, each being better than the last one. This is one of my favorite final bosses I've ever seen in a video game, and I personally prefer this final boss over the devil. And it feels so good to punch his lights out. Before we move on to number 1, I just want to talk about the ending and how it's really weird. So Salt Baker is sentenced to community service for his crimes. What? For trying to bake Miss Chalice's soul into the Wonder Tart, for attempting murder of Cuphead and Mugman, and actual murder of all the ingredients. He has to do a little bit of community service, and once he's done with the community service, he gets his bakery back, and everyone is just so happy about it. Why? Why are we happy that the psychopath got his bakery back? Correction. Why are we happy that the psychopath got his murder house back? This ending is bonkers. Anyway, let's move on to the number 1 boss in the Cuphead Delicious Last Course.
For the delicious last course, for the delicious last course. Since you gallop hard to make the Wonder Tart for the delicious last course.
And the number 1 boss in the Cuphead Delicious Last Course is the Howling Aces. Now this is probably a controversial pick, but I just love this boss. It's cinematic, it's fun, the boss design is great. I love everything about this boss. But before we talk about the boss, let's talk about the flask. It's so cool that this guy helps us out. He helps us by piloting the plane that we're standing on. And it's so cool that we have a recurring character helping us. If you don't remember, the Flask was the person who gave us the plane blueprints in Inkwell Isle 1, and the bombs in Inkwell Isle 2. I just find it really cool that we have somebody who's not trying to kill us. He even claps when we complete a phase, and looks sad when we die. Another cool thing about the Flask is, during this entire fight, we can move the plane by standing on a certain side of it. Anyway, now to the actual boss. In the first phase, we fight against this bulldog. This guy has a lot of fun attacks that feel really good to dodge. And I like how they are all dog themed. There are attacks with bones, fire hydrants, cats, and tennis balls. All stuff that is associated with dogs. Now moving on to the second phase. This phase may seem simple, but there's actually something really cool you can do with this phase, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. In this phase, you have to defeat 4 small dogs in jetpacks, while they shoot letters at you. They shoot B, O, and W. All the letters you need to spell out bow wow. Also, the death quote is affirm Roger Fox, which spells out arf arf. Now onto the cool thing I was talking about earlier. When the jetpack dogs are almost defeated, the smoke coming out of their jetpacks will turn gray. If all of their jetpacks have gray smokes and none of them are dead, then you get a secret phase. It's not a very interesting secret phase, but it's still really cool. In the secret phase, the jetpack dogs from earlier will now throw pineapples at you. And that's pretty much the entire secret phase. It's still cool that this boss has one though. Now let's talk about the actual final phase. This phase is the main reason this boss fight is number 1, because this phase is so cinematic. At the beginning of the phase, this dog lady will shoot 3 rounds of lasers at you. The last one you have to parry. Then her big plane thing will spin the camera 90 degrees and put you in its mouth. This is absolutely crazy and so cinematic. And I love how the dog lady's attacks are just dog balls. And once she's done throwing the dog balls at you, you'll be flipped 90 degrees again, and the cycle repeats. This is so cinematic, so satisfying, so fun. I love everything about this boss fight. It is a little hard to control Cuphead when you're flipped sideways, but other than that, this is perfect. Anyway, that's it. That is all 12 Cuphead DLC bosses ranked. Overall, I think these bosses are better than the original bosses. I feel like because there were less bosses, they took more time to make each one of them feel more unique, and I love that. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I'll see you in the next one.